My guest today is Senior Vice President with Northstar Resource Group, Shaun McDuffee. Shaun is also the founder and president of Twin Oak Advisors, a firm that focuses on financial planning needs for physicians. He joins us to talk about his work in the industry as it pertains to physicians, his commitment to giving back to his community, and the lessons he has learned throughout his career. I'm Paul Blanco, and this is Small Steps, Big Wins. Shaun, welcome to the show. Small Steps, Big Wins. So excited to have you on the show. And you know, just so you know, when I was putting this show together and thinking about my audience and the advisors that I wanted to impact, I had a very short list of some people that I wanted to bring on the show. And you were on that short list. What you've accomplished in your career, I can't wait to share that with our whole audience here and all the things that you have done to make you who you are. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, and I'm excited to be here. Anytime I get a chance to, hang out with a dear friend, it's a good day.
Well, great. Thank you. So let's start right in the beginning. I know you came in right off the campus, basically, into your current career at Northstar. You've been at Northstar that whole time. Tell me how you got in and how you got started. Because people always want to know, like, how did you get to there, from there to here?
Sure. I always sort of laugh when people ask me that, how did you get into the business? Did you know you always wanted to do it? And I literally had no idea that I wanted to come in to financial services or back then financial planning. And I literally was cold called by the person running our Madison, Wisconsin office while I was in school at UW-Madison. And literally just said, I want you to come in, hear about an opportunity. I had been interviewing with numerous companies. This was back in the late 80s, which if you remember the late 80s, it was not a great time to be coming out of college. There were not a lot of opportunities and a lot of unemployment. So I was interviewing everywhere, and most of it was corporate. I came in, I interviewed at Northstar, and make a very long story as short as I can, it just something clicked. I met with all the advisors that were in that office. They were younger advisors. It was vibrant. They were professional. And the more I interviewed with them, the more I went, man, I think I could do this. Now, I didn't know what it was, but I thought, hey, I think I can do this. I could see myself being here. And I was really blessed that, my mentor and father figure, Phil Richards, very early in my career, kind of adopted me. He kind of brought the big dumb animal under his wing, and one of the legends in leadership really became a father to me. So any success I've had in this industry, I directly attribute back to him and the others at Northstar.
Well, that's amazing. That's an amazing story. And by the way, Phil is not only a father figure to you, but great friend of mine, legend in the industry. And what I love about him is, I'm a big fan of Peter Drucker, and he always said you have to retire to something. Well, Phil lives that every single day now, which is pretty cool to see,
There is no retirement for Phil. It's just
I know.
Rewirement,
Yep. And just working differently. So, well, it's interesting. So you get started, and I think pretty early on in your career, you made probably a very big decision for your business where you started to work with physicians, but really, you're a young 23, 24-year-old. And really, I think, and keep me, honest on this, you started with residents really right out of the gate. So my question is twofold. One is, what made you do that? Did someone tell you to do that? And then tell us how that all started and what happened there.
Sure. So in Madison with Northstar, I think one of the things that was a little unique about our office, it was predominantly younger advisors, newer advisors, and they really focused on working with people that were their age, right? With the idea that you talk to professionals, people that have good income potential, but you start with them at ground zero when they're broke. And when I started, they kind of gave me the engineering market and said, you're going to cold call, literally pick up the phone and cold call, student engineers at Wisconsin that are graduating and invite them in to hear about our professional planning program. I was doing that. And I happened to have, when I started at North Star, my roommates, 3 of them went into med school.
Oh, wow.
And so I kind of stumbled into the medical market. We had an advisor, Todd Bramson, who was really, that was his market. He worked with med students, helped them with student loan planning, and then helped them when they went into residency, et cetera. And he always told me, he said, if you can start with a physician before they start mismanaging money, when no one wants to talk with them, you can truly make an impact in their life. And so, I literally started doing pro bono classes at my house in the evening with a bunch of medical students that, had no idea what to do. And I was making no money, talking to people with no money. And eventually they went out, they started making money. They kept referring me to other people. I was kind of known as the guy that, worked with broke people. And Phil always told me, he says, when you start out in this career, you will earn what your clients earn. Well, I thought, that's great. I'm going to be broke for the rest of my life. And definitely the first 4 or 5 years, that was spot on.
Yep. Yeah. But think about what you said. I think that you made a really awesome point there was if you helped them before they made some of the money mistakes, right? So you picked the market, both engineering and physicians that make great livings. But if they made those great livings and they got the right habits early on, they became affluent clients for you when they're in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. So I think, you stumbled onto it, but the way you said that has really changed what your career is like today, And
you're spot on. It's one of the byproducts, and it wasn't really something that was done with foresight, but one of the byproducts was, if you start with people that have nothing and you help them and you invest in them, they stay with you, right? Unless you give them a good reason to leave you. When everybody else comes calling, everybody wants to talk to these guys when they're 10, 12 years out.
Correct.
And now they're making great money. But if you've done a good job of building that relationship and you've helped them make those decisions in the beginning, they stick with you. Yeah, so I found a tremendous persistency with those individuals as long as you serviced them and kept your promises.
Well, it's interesting you bring back, because I started a little after you. I started in 91. And I remember, and I only sold life insurance at that time, right? And I remember a quote, which is probably still true today, that people buy life insurance 7 times in a lifetime. Mm-hmm. And that's a LIMRA stat. So when I would go in and sell, a $50 a month case, I'd leave the house. It was their first policy. And I would say, Paul, as long as you service them properly, you got 6 more sales. Yep. And that gave me great strength, going on and building a business like that.
Yeah, we focused, and again, I have to credit my, kind of mentors in the Madison office. They really preached automated savings, right? And the fact that $50 a month, $100 a month, $300 a month plan, if you can help people build that savings habit early on, they keep doing it forever and they just keep increasing it. And so we didn't measure AUM by, how many millions did you have? We actually only tracked how much a month was set up on automatic investments.
I love it. So bring me back to, and maybe give me a parallel to today, because you're still working in those markets. What is, like, for a lack of a better way to explain it, what is the starter kit that you gave them? Like, was there, like, I'm going to sell them life, whole life, term, DI, a Roth? What was, like, and Roths weren't even around in the beginning, but what was how was that?
Well, I think really what we've always tried to do with physicians is solve their biggest problem first.
Right.
So, inevitably in the beginning, if you're a master at understanding student loans or student loan forgiveness and all the various types of programs, they don't understand that. And so that's what's keeping them up at night. So if you can solve what's keeping them up at night, the rest of the stuff just comes. So initially it's helping them understand and look at different scenarios for debt financing. It's getting their biggest income, their biggest asset, which is their income, protected. So disability was a must. Life insurance, same thing. It's like, hey, if you're going to take care of disability, get your insurability protected. So we sold and still sell an amazing amount of term insurance. And we talked a lot about human life value. A lot of what we did was set the stage for them and introduce them to what we would come back to talk to them about in 3, 4, 5 years. So in the beginning, pay down debt, build cash, get basic risk management products. And we would do hundreds of clients a year. And then really it was, okay, now you're going into practice. That's the next big time, right? So you're looking at buying a home. How can we make sure you're not house poor? How can we automate 20% of your income to savings? How do we help you integrate benefits? How do we bump up coverages? And so it really was evolving with the client.
Love it.
So today it's the same strategy. I mean, now I don't really take on new clients. Most of what I've been building is the marketing engine and kind of the, taking relationships at 200 hospitals and positioning younger advisors in there to do the exact same thing I did when I was them. Except that they don't have to hunt for those people as much, but they still need to do all the same exact things I was doing 35 years ago.
Well, let's spend a little time on that before I go backwards. So 200 hospitals that you had relationships with, some high-level person that runs, say, the resident program or something. Am I on the right path there?
Well, yeah, actually a little different. It was more of a ground up. So I think a lot of times people that have relationships at hospitals, they know an administrator, they know a program director. And yes, I have a fair number of those now just because, my surgeon became the head of the surgery department. But really our relationships at all these hospitals have come from, for lack of a better word, a passing of a torch. I work with a chief resident. Chief resident's getting ready to leave. First question as they're getting ready to leave is, hey, who's coming in to take over for you? Who's next year's chief? Oh, it's Paul. You got to meet Paul. Hey, would you mind sending him an email? Introduce me? Sure. So it was always getting passed backwards.
Got it.
So that we basically, as these written, the beauty of the resident market is the fact that every year, there's 25,000 new PGY1s. Right. So every year you got 25,000 new people coming in and there's about 20,000 that cycle out a year. And you say, why is it 25 in and 20 out? Part of it is they've got fellowships and they don't all come out in a steady stream. But the point is that market is constantly rejuvenating itself or regenerating itself.
Sure. Which is amazing. But then back to what you said earlier, the 25,000 or the ones that become clients of yours, they have that, when you think of this long line of their life, the buying cycle of their life, there's so many other things.
Correct.
Once they get into the system, there's so many other things that you get. And so back to what you said earlier, you were teaching in the house, your friends, and it's kind of interesting, right? Because we talk about a natural market. What you stumbled into was you had a natural market that had 3 residents, and all of a sudden, that becomes a business, 30 years later that you've built.
And once somebody figures out you'll work for them for free and they don't care if you're broke, people will flood to your door.
Pretty funny, right? But when you think about it now, when you did that, when you met with the chief resident, did you then go and teach at the actual hospital?
I did that for many years. So there was probably, I'd say for 15 years, give or take a few, I was traveling all over the country. I would give, typically 200 presentations a year. And so, we had offices around the country that I strategically placed young advisors in, and I would literally just fly in, do 2 or 3 presentations. Most of them were dinners because what I learned worked really well. It's one thing to go in at a grand rounds, and which most hospitals won't let non-physicians in anymore because too many people have gone in and just ravaged the hospitals.
Sure.
But I also found those weren't incredibly effective because the residents had to be there and the people making the decisions were the spouses. The residents were too busy. They're working 80 hours a week. And so they don't care about this stuff. It's the spouse at home that cares about it. So when you'd hold dinner, that's why I said I would do, back to back to back dinner presentations. I'd do 2, 3 in an evening. And because the spouse could be there.
Got it.
So it was mostly live. I made a conscious decision when I kind of founded Twin Oak Advisors that in 2016, I really kind of built it so that I could turn it over to others. And in 2016, I decided I was going to try to build out a digital marketing presence. Selfishly, I have 3 daughters. They were getting involved in band and sports, and I was coaching basketball, and I didn't want to be on the road. So I literally in 2016 said, plane is parked. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to start doing digital marketing to the places we had relationships with the idea that, I realized there were a lot of really, really busy residents, often the best specialties you wanted, who couldn't go to the dinners.
Sure.
But they still wanted disability insurance. They still wanted life insurance. So I literally focused on that from about 2016 on, and then built sort of this Mayo Clinic model, if you will, of, hey, solve their biggest need, student loans, disability, life, whatever it is, and then have that specialist hand them off to another specialist. That's what Twin Oak's based on.
I love it. And when you think about it, when you think of being an entrepreneur, the simplest way to explain what does an entrepreneur do? He or she solves the biggest problem that someone needs. And then you go out and sell that. And that's what you did. So talk about the digital marketing, because I know that, and then we'll go into COVID, because I'm sure that changed the business big time too. But what is the digital marketing look like today?
Well, it looks significantly different than what it did in 2016. And to your point, it's COVID. But in 2016, it was basically just emailing hospitals that I had contacts in, emailing hospitals that I knew syntaxes for, that I knew how to get hold of people, and simply saying, hey, we're within, April 9th. You got 2.5 months to lock in disability while you're still in training. Oh, by the way, the 6 major carriers all offer discounts while you're in training. So literally it was a commodity play. It wasn't
just call me and I'll help you.
Yep. It was just reply if you want quotes, I'll take care of it, go. And that started to really take off because it was interesting. I did it as an experiment, and many of the people at North Star said, oh, you can't sell stuff over the internet. Are you nuts? These people won't buy insurance. They buy books, they buy whatever. Well, turned out you can. And the challenge, and this is where COVID kind of helped. The challenge was we did an amazing job of bringing hundreds of people in for disability and life insurance, but they were transactional sales. I never met any of them. Okay. So it's sort of handicapped. One of my strong suits was being able to sit across from somebody, look at them eyeball to eyeball, and read what they're saying, right? I mean, as an amazing, advisor and leader, you want to be looking at them. Yeah. So with COVID, and so I was trying to figure out, how do we bridge going from disability and life into investments and planning and everything else? COVID happened. And what came out of COVID, the only good thing there's 2 good things that came out of COVID. One, my 3 daughters were stuck in a house with us for a year.
I love that too.
And I had 1 year of dinners with juniors in high school, which never would have happened.
Sure.
Second good thing was that doctors figured out how to use Zoom.
Zoom. Yep.
They would never video with you. They always want to talk on the phone. And all of a sudden, everybody started doing Zoom. That caused kind of the next explosion for Twin Oak. Was now we could set up quick Zoom meetings to solve their first problem, but then talk to them about all the other problems they don't yet know they're going to have.
And build different relationships like you did face to face, right?
Bingo. Yep. That was a game changer for us. Was, I think last year, my little group of, and as I mentioned earlier, we built this truly as kind of the Mayo Clinic. I've got a DI specialist, a life specialist, an investment specialist, a student loan specialist, an estate planning specialist. Well, that little group of us, we're now bringing about 500 physicians a year in, but the idea is that they're walking in one door, whatever that door is, student loans, DI, whatever, and then they're being handed off to the next specialist. They're walking them to the next door, right?
Yeah,
a concept I know you guys do a great job of is walking them to the next expert.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. Like for me, like you, sometimes you trip over things, but I realized early on in the industry, there's only two ways to grow a business: is either see more people or sell bigger cases.
Yep.
Right. And what I realized was it's very hard to just find rich people every day. So what we did was we did planning, and we said, all right, if we get the life, the disability, the long-term care, the investments, the annuities, the P&C, and all of a sudden you built that wall and the case size got bigger. And then that's how you grew. And that's the same thing you're doing.
Yep.
You just built the Mayo Clinic model. So I love it.
Yeah. You're spot on, Paul.
And how many clients, you're bringing in 500 new residents, but how many clients, how many physicians do you have on the books now over 30 years?
That's a hard one to answer. I can tell you it's going to be in the neighborhood of around 30,000.
Holy man.
But the way I've always built it is I never brought in solo clients. So I always brought in someone else. So if I got a lead, I always grabbed a young advisor to do it. So I don't do the servicing on those, let's call it 30,000 clients.
Got it.
I might have 300 that I personally work with because, it's my belief if you're doing full, holistic financial planning with kind of your profile client, there's a finite number of those individuals you can truly take care of by yourself. And that to me in itself is one of the, I don't want to call it problems, but it's one of the challenges with a solo practitioner.
Correct.
But if you build teams, you have an almost infinite amount of people that you can help and serve.
Yeah. And I think that big word is scale, and you just keep scaling and scaling and scaling. So let's talk about for a minute here, because we talked a little bit offline before we got on today, and you hit a couple of chords that are important to me too, as I look at impacting our society and making sure people are financially secure is my whole journey. And, you talk about the biggest problem, and it sounds like from what you said earlier, there's two of them, right? The beginning, you use the DI as you're getting out of residency, when you talked about your digital thing as one. And then number two was their biggest problem, which is probably number one, which was the student loans. But you've been talking a lot about life insurance too. And obviously these are affluent as they grow in their practice. So tell me how that, because, our industry today has done a poor job of, switching from life insurance and DI to AUM.
Yep.
And it's so important of the financial plan. So tell me how you're leading through that.
Yeah.
You have a big team now.
Yeah. You're spot on. I think there has been a migration over the last 30 years from, life insurance being the core of the financial plan. And as advisors started to do more and more in investing, It became more and more about chasing AUM because AUM was what people wanted to talk about. It was sexy. It was fun. And I think a couple things have happened. I think many advisors, and older advisors won't admit it, but they've sort of forgotten how to sell life insurance, because life insurance truly is sold. You have to, and when I say sold, sometimes people get a negative connotation like, oh, you're selling me something. No, you're helping them understand the product as a tool. I can't remember, this was it was probably around the start of COVID. I was interviewed and they were talking about, whole life insurance and saying, permanent life insurance, it seems like kind of a scam. And they had this very negative slant to it. And I stopped them for a second. I said, here's the issue. Life insurance is neither good nor bad. It's a tool. Okay. It's like saying, I'm going to wash my windows. Is a hammer a good tool to use to wash my windows? So I say, I'm going to wash my windows with a hammer. And you'd say, well, you're a lunatic. Well, is it the problem of the hammer or the lunatic trying to wash the window with a hammer? Right?
Yes.
And so the whole notion of, are you using the tool correctly? And so that was my issue where where I stopped the interview to say, whole life and permanent insurance are amazing tools if used correctly. Okay. When I'm talking about life insurance with a prospect or a client, I start first off with human life value, right? Have you figured out the economic replacement value of your loss to your family? That's first and foremost, we have to start there. What's a good rule of thumb? Typically, I'll tell people for every million of insurance that you have, you've protected about $50,000 a year of income. So physician, you're making $400,000. We need about $8 million of life insurance to replace your economic value. And I said, I can show you how we can take all these numbers and present value back. I'm a rule of thumb guy.
I agree. Right? It's interesting that people understand the 5% rule on retirement money, but when you talk about insurance, they say that seems like a lot.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah. So I look at it and say, start with human life value. Now the question simply becomes, do you rent it or do you own it? Do you want it as an asset? Do you want something on the balance sheet? Or are we simply looking for the protection? Neither one is good or bad. I want $8 million of coverage for you. Initially, you're a resident, you're broke. Okay, let's do this as cheap as possible and essentially buy you an option to do something different in the future.
Yep.
So I guess I've always started, and that's probably something that's a little unique in that even within my own company, I find people are significantly underinsured. If you start with human life value, now you can have future discussions about that tool. So sorry, I went off on a long tangent.
No, I agree. And I love your language that you use because everyone will sell. You have a conversion, right? But you're talking language that people understand when you said you have a future option. I really love that. That's something I'll take away and use with my people now. Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. So when you think of this journey now and where you are today, obviously there's a huge mindset shift when you went digital, when you built Twin Oaks, right? And the question now is, where is your mindset going today? And what's the next, 5 and 10 years look like as you continue to grow this practice that you have?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that my team and I are really focused on, we've built a model that's demonstrated that we can bring new physicians in. What we're really looking and what we've been focused on the past 2 to 3 years is a much deeper connection and relationship with them. So it's moving to a fee for service model on advice.
So talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So, every physician that we bring in, we're explaining to them that, look, we're going to donate our time while you're in residency. You're broke. Okay. For us to charge you a fee, I'd rather you take that money and apply it to a 7% student loan. When you And because that's one of the first questions they ask you is, well, how do I pay for all this? And I'm like, nope, we've got you while you're in training. Okay. Once you transition out, we're going to move you on to a subscription-based model.
Love
It'll
it.
be about the same as your gym membership that you're not using. It's going to be about the same as your financial or as your cell phone bill, but you're going to transition over to a monthly subscription. And that basically will cover any and all advice that we give you. If there's implementation on that advice, we'll get paid directly by either an asset fee if we're managing money. If you're purchasing insurance products, there's insurance commissions built in there. We'll fully disclose them. But at some point, if our assets reach a certain level, typically 500,000 for the younger physician, we then will, in many instances, we will eliminate the financial planning fee because it's replaced by the fees and the assets. Now, some advisors say, well, why would you do that? Well, most of the heavy lifting that's done in the type of client we work with is the first 3 or 4 years.
Sure.
Where that financial planning fee is what enables you to keep that relationship with the physician. If there's paying off debt and saving money and purchasing permanent products and doing other things, revenue will be generated in other ways.
Fair.
So
let me play it back just a piece. So the first 3 or 4 years, you donate your time.
Correct.
And maybe it's a 10-year run where you're charging a subscription. And would you say that's like $50 to $100 a month?
Usually it's about $150 a month.
$150 a month. And is that a standard price that you use?
$150 a month. And I would say the average length of that subscription, I mean, if they do what we're asking them to do, and get their financial house in order, it's usually going to be in that 6 to 8 years, probably. Some people might be longer if they're living outside of their means, and in which case, after that period of time, we may be telling them to find a new advisor. And
fair.
It doesn't make sense to pay us.
Yeah, because you can't help them. So right. I'm more curious. I have a number in my head, but when you go through your stage of donating, like last year, let's just make it up. You brought 500 new on. So in 36 months, all 500 are going to get asked to go on a subscription because you donated. What's usually the conversion rate of that?
Well, and that's part of when you ask kind of like where this is going, that's the journey we're on right now, is to figure that out. I can tell you in the past, we usually about 35% of the people that purchase something from us became a true client. So they may have been customers. They bought DI, they bought life. Maybe they did a 529, but about 30 to 35% of them would become full-blown clients.
Got it.
Okay? I am guesstimating we should land between 25 and 35 in this model. Again, since this is Zoom-based, it's hard to say what that conversion ratio, but that's sort of our goal. If we can get a quarter of these people to become full-blown clients, then this has worked.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I think it's really, really awesome. So now that you have this model, you got the team. How big is the team today, Shaun?
Right now, the team has, we have 4 what I call service coordinators who are salaried and a piece of commission. They are in charge of X number of teaching hospitals and building those relationships. We have 2 DI specialists, a life specialist, we have a CFA who manages portfolios for our clients, and then 12 to 14 team members. So if we count revenue generating people, it's probably 4, 7, 8, 9. My student loan guy, call it 10.
And then you probably have another 10, 12 staff.
Yeah, probably a little higher because I'm forgetting a few that says call it 15 staff.
Yeah, so 25 people. So you got a large team. and think about being a solo practitioner, go into that. So
Yeah.
really, really amazing. So I guess my last question for you today is, and I can go on forever with you. This has been amazing. Just I'm really enjoying this. If you think about, yourself 30 years ago or the young advisor coming in today, what would you suggest to them? And then finish with, if you were a veteran today, because you're evolving. So give me the young advisor one, and then I want to talk about the subscription thing again and the veteran, but give me the younger one first.
So there's sort of similar advice for both.
Okay.
I think one of the biggest things that I learned, and I've been blessed to learn a ton, and always the old adage of always be learning and always be asking questions, right? Something you're superb at is, don't be afraid to break everything and rebuild it.
Love it.
Good friend of mine, I think you've met him, Marshall Gifford,
Sure.
Very, very good producer, top of the table producer. He always jokes that, every 7 years, Shaun reinvents himself.
Yep.
And part of that is maybe my nature. I get a little bored, and I like challenges. So I like to say, I'm sort of drawn to something. If someone says it can't be done, I always look at that as there's always a way it can be done. The question is, do you want to do it? So I think the thing that I would say to new advisors, number one, don't be afraid to fire bullets. Don't be afraid to try new things. Focus on something that works, that your mentor or that someone has shown you a path to, but then don't be afraid to fire a few bullets to try something else. Just don't give up on what's working.
Yep.
Right. Once you've been in the career 5, 6, 7 years, that's when I would probably challenge you to say, try to reinvent yourself. Don't get static or stale. Same to the more senior veteran advisors don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone. Right. And we've heard this a million times, but I think that's something that happens a lot with senior advisors, is that they just have always done things a certain way. And it's not that it becomes easy, but it becomes comfortable and safe.
Yeah. It's less hard, I always say. And I always teach people, get comfortable being uncomfortable. Right. And I had a young advisor that just broke, he's in the top 1% of the industry. He's like 33 years old. He was on the show a couple of weeks ago. And he said to me, Paul, you always said something my first year in the business. She said, if it's not broken, break it. And he goes, I never understood that. Now I understand that as I'm building this team and growing my business. Well, listen, Shaun, thank you. First off, when I went into leadership 31 years ago, the one thing that was the scariest part of it was I liked being on the front lines and impacting clients' lives and helping them, put pen to paper and do the plan and get the coverages they needed. And when I took this role, I said, wow, I have to do that now through others. And, knowing you for 20 plus years and watching what you've done, the lives that you're impacting, I can't thank you enough for carrying that message on for people like me that took just a different direction. So number one, thank you. And when I think of, the show is small steps, big wins. And you've been doing that from day one, right? Taking little steps and then just piling on the next one. And just think of the evolution of sending out a fax and doing a quote to building a whole digital business now. So you are exactly what small steps, big wins is. So Shaun, thank you for being on today. And I can't wait. I'm going to have to bring you back in a year or so, because I can't wait to hear the journey of the new things you're doing with the subscription models and the evolution of the team. So congratulations on all your success.
Thank you. And I applaud you for putting this format together for people in our industry and to be a resource. I think that it's something that's very needed. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. You got it, Shaun. Have a great rest of the day. And thank you again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for listening to Small Steps, Big Wins. Please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
All opinions expressed by the program participants are solely their current opinions and do not reflect the opinions their respective parent companies or affiliates or the companies with which the program participants are affiliated. Investments or strategies mentioned in this program may not be suitable for you, and you should make your own independent decision regarding them. This material does not take into account your particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs, and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. You should strongly consider seeking advice from your own investment advisor. Securities and investment advisory services offered through qualified registered representatives of MML Investor Services, LLC. Member SIPC, 6 Corporate Drive, Shelton, Connecticut, 06484, telephone number 203-513-6000.